The deep space scanner beeped 3 times in rapid succession, a sound that made Dr. Emma Reed look up from her coffee with sudden interest. She had been studying quantum field equations for the past 6 hours aboard the research vessel Meridian, and her eyes were getting tired from all the numbers and symbols. But that particular beep pattern meant something extraordinary had just appeared on their sensors. "David, you need to see this," she called out to Captain Torres, who was reviewing supply reports in his ready room. The discovery that would change everything for humanity had just drifted into their scanning range near the Vega star system. Torres walked onto the bridge and immediately noticed the tension in his crew's faces. Chief Engineer Tom Walsh was hunched over his console, running diagnostics on their equipment because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Communications Officer Lisa Chun had stopped her usual chatter and was staring at her screen with wide eyes. Dr. Sarah Kim, their xenobiologist, had abandoned her microscope samples and was now standing behind Reed's station. "Report," Torres said simply, though he could already feel that familiar tingle in his spine that came before life-changing moments. Reed pointed at the main viewer, where a massive structure slowly rotated against the backdrop of distant stars. "It appeared about 10 minutes ago, roughly 2 million kilometers off our starboard side. The object is crystalline in composition, approximately 3 kilometers long and 1 kilometer wide, but that's not the interesting part. The structure looked like someone had grown a city out of pure diamond and then twisted it through dimensions that human eyes weren't meant to perceive. Light bent around it in impossible ways, creating rainbow patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid aurora. Sometimes the crystal appeared solid and real, other times it looked translucent, as if existing in multiple realities simultaneously. The energy readings are off the charts," Walsh added, his voice tight with excitement and fear. "Whatever that thing is, it's generating power levels equivalent to a small star. But the energy signature is unlike anything in our databases." Torres studied the readings on his command display. The numbers were indeed staggering, but what caught his attention was the pattern of energy fluctuations. They weren't random or chaotic like most alien technology they had encountered. Instead, they followed mathematical sequences that seemed almost familiar, like equations he had seen before but couldn't quite remember. "There's more," Reed continued, her hands dancing across her console as she pulled up additional sensor data. "The space around that structure is exhibiting temporal distortions. Time itself is moving differently near that object. In some areas, it's flowing backward. In others, it's nearly stopped completely." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had been exploring space for over 3 centuries, encountering dozens of alien species and technologies that challenged their understanding of physics. But temporal manipulation remained the holy grail of scientific achievement, something that existed only in theoretical papers and science fiction stories. "Are you saying that's a time machine?" Torres asked, though he already knew the answer from Reed's expression. "Not just any time machine," she replied, pulling up a 3-dimensional model of the structure's energy field. "This appears to be the most sophisticated temporal manipulation device ever detected. The precision of the chronoton field generation suggests a level of technological advancement far beyond anything we've encountered." Torres activated the ship's communication array and began composing a priority message to Earth Command. This discovery would need to be reported immediately, but he also knew that within hours, every major power in human space would be sending ships to investigate. The race to understand and potentially acquire this technology would be intense. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," Chun announced suddenly. "It's coming from the structure itself." "On screen," Torres ordered. Feeling his heart rate increase, the main viewer flickered and changed, showing what appeared to be empty space filled with swirling patterns of light. Gradually, the patterns began to coalesce into something resembling a face, though it was unlike any biological features Torres had ever seen. The being seemed to be made of pure energy, with thoughts and emotions visible as shifting colors and geometric shapes. "Greetings, linear beings," the entity said, its voice carrying harmonics that made the ship's hull vibrate slightly. "I am Prime Conductor Axiom of the Eternal Assembly. We have observed your approach and detected your primitive scanning attempts. Torres stepped forward, drawing on his diplomatic training. I am Captain David Torres of the human vessel Meridian. We come in peace and scientific curiosity. Your technology appears to be far advanced beyond our current understanding. The energy being's form shifted, taking on what might have been an expression of mild amusement. Indeed, your species has much to learn. We have been monitoring your development for several of your centuries. You show promise in some areas, but remain dangerously immature in others. We would be honored to learn from your knowledge, Torres replied carefully. Perhaps we could establish formal diplomatic relations between our species. Impossible, Axiom responded immediately, its form darkening slightly. Your species lacks the wisdom necessary to handle temporal manipulation safely. We have seen countless civilizations destroy themselves with such power. The Eternal Assembly has determined that humanity is not ready for access to time-stream technology. Reed stepped forward, unable to contain her scientific curiosity. But surely you could share some basic principles? Theoretical frameworks that might help us understand. No, Axiom interrupted, its voice carrying finality. The decision has been made by consensus of the Assembly. Temporal manipulation is forbidden to species that have not achieved sufficient evolutionary maturity. Your kind still engages in warfare, environmental destruction, and social inequality. Such beings cannot be trusted with the power to alter history itself. The alien structure began to pulse with increased energy, and Torres realized they were preparing to leave. Humanity's first contact with time travel technology was about to slip away, possibly forever. The captain's mind raced, considering options and possibilities. We understand your concerns, he said diplomatically, but perhaps there are other ways we could learn from each other. Cultural exchange, scientific observation, mutual. The discussion is concluded, Axiom declared. We will depart your system within 1 of your hours. Do not attempt to follow or interfere with our vessel. Such actions would be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew staring at an empty screen. The greatest discovery in human history was about to vanish, taking with it secrets that could revolutionize their understanding of time, space, and reality itself. Torres studied the alien vessel through the main viewer, his tactical mind already working on alternative approaches. The aliens had said they couldn't have the technology, but they hadn't said anything about other possibilities. Silence filled the briefing room like thick fog as Torres finished explaining his idea to the senior staff. Dr. Reed sat with her mouth slightly open, still processing what she had just heard. Chief Engineer Walsh was frantically scribbling calculations on his tablet, trying to determine if such a plan was even theoretically possible. Communications Officer Chun stared at the captain as if he had just suggested they try to lasso the sun. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Dr. Kim said slowly, her voice careful and measured. You want to physically attach our ship to an alien time machine and hope they don't notice us hitching a ride through the temporal vortex. Torres nodded, his expression completely serious. The Assembly said we can't have time travel technology because we're not advanced enough. They never said anything about being passengers on their vessel. It's a loophole, and humans have always been good at finding loopholes. Reed finally found her voice. David, the energy levels involved in temporal manipulation could vaporize our entire ship in milliseconds. We don't even understand the basic principles of how their technology works. One miscalculation and we'll be scattered across 17 different timelines. Actually, Walsh interrupted, looking up from his calculations, it might be possible. Our magnetic docking clamps use quantum field generators to create molecular bonds with other vessels. If I could modify the field harmonics to match the temporal frequency of their chronoton emissions, the engineer trailed off, his eyes growing bright with the kind of dangerous enthusiasm that had led to both humanity's greatest achievements and most spectacular disasters. He began sketching diagrams on the room's display screen, showing how their standard docking equipment could theoretically be converted into a temporal synchronization system. The quantum entanglement principle should allow us to lock onto their time stream, he continued, warming to the idea. Instead of fighting against the temporal distortions, we'd be riding along with them, like a surfer catching a wave instead of trying to swim against the current. Chun shook her head vigorously. Even if the physics work out, what makes you think the aliens will allow it? They could just shake us off, or worse, decide we're being hostile and blast us into atoms. Torres had already considered this problem. That's where careful diplomacy comes in. We don't ask permission to steal their technology or demand access to their secrets. We simply request permission to observe their departure as interested scientists. Technically, we wouldn't be lying. Technically, we'd be committing the most audacious act of technological piracy in human history, Kim pointed out dryly. Exactly, Torres replied with a grin. And if it works, we'll have achieved something that no other species has managed. The Assembly clearly expects us to give up and accept their decision. They're not prepared for humans to find a third option. Reed was studying Walsh's preliminary calculations, her scientific mind already engaged despite her reservations. The temporal shear forces would be enormous. Our hull would need to be reinforced with emergency structural integrity fields, and we'd have to perfectly match their chronoton frequency or risk being torn apart by dimensional stress. How long would we need to make the modifications? Torres asked. Walsh consulted his tablet again. Working around the clock with the entire engineering team, maybe 16 hours. But that's assuming everything goes perfectly and we don't run into any unexpected problems. Which we will, Kim added pessimistically. This is completely untested technology based on theoretical physics and wishful thinking. The margin for error is essentially zero. Torres stood up and activated the room's main display, showing a real-time image of the alien structure still rotating majestically in space nearby. Look at that vessel. It represents knowledge and capabilities that could advance human civilization by thousands of years. Time travel, dimensional manipulation, energy technologies beyond our current understanding. Are we really going to let all of that slip away because it's dangerous? Yes, Kim replied immediately. That's exactly what we should do. Some risks are too great to take, no matter what the potential rewards might be. But Reed was already running additional calculations on her own tablet, her curiosity overcoming her caution. If we could successfully dock with their vessel and survive temporal transit, the scientific data we'd collect would be invaluable. Direct observation of chronoton field manipulation, dimensional stress patterns, temporal navigation techniques. The physics alone would keep our researchers busy. For centuries, Walsh agreed. And if we could understand even a fraction of their technology, it would revolutionize everything from space travel to energy production. Torres could see the tide turning in the room as scientific excitement began to override rational fear. This was exactly what he had hoped for when he assembled this particular group of officers. They were all risk-takers and innovators, the kind of people who had volunteered for deep space exploration precisely because they weren't satisfied with safe, predictable lives. Jung, I need you to compose a message to the Assembly, he ordered. Something diplomatically worded that requests permission to observe their departure at close range. Don't mention docking or time travel specifically. Just express our scientific interest in witnessing their temporal manipulation technology in action. Jun nodded reluctantly and began drafting the communication. What if they say no? Then we'll have to decide whether to attempt it anyway, Torres replied honestly. But I suspect they'll agree. From their perspective, watching primitive humans try to comprehend advanced technology would probably be amusing. They won't expect us to actually try anything. Reed was now fully committed to the project, her tablet filling with equations and energy calculations. We'll need to recalibrate our sensors to detect chronoton particles and temporal field fluctuations. If we're going to do this, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. I'll start modifying the docking clamps immediately, Walsh said, already heading for the door. We don't have much time before they decide to leave. As the meeting broke up and his officers scattered to their tasks, Torres remained in the briefing room staring at the alien vessel. In less than 24 hours, they would either achieve the impossible or die trying. For a species that had colonized distant stars by strapping themselves to controlled explosions and hurling themselves into the void, those seemed like acceptable odds. Sweat dripped from Walsh's forehead as he made final adjustments to the modified docking system. The engineering bay had been transformed into a maze of quantum field generators, temporal sensors, and jury-rigged control systems that looked like they belonged in a mad scientist's laboratory rather than on a starship. 16 hours of non-stop work had produced something that was either brilliant or catastrophically dangerous, and Walsh wasn't entirely sure which. "Field synchronization at 72% and climbing," reported his assistant, Lieutenant Hayes, whose hands shook slightly as she monitored the chronoton detection array. "The quantum entanglement matrix is holding steady, but I'm seeing some fluctuations in the dimensional stability field." Walsh wiped his hands on a greasy towel and checked the readings one more time. The mathematics were sound, at least in theory, but they were attempting something that had never been tried before by any known species. The margin for error was so small that a single miscalculation could result in their atoms being scattered across multiple timelines simultaneously. On the bridge, Torres watched the alien vessel through the main viewer as his ship slowly approached. The crystalline structure had begun pulsing with increased energy over the past hour, and read sensors indicated that they were preparing for temporal departure. Their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. "Distance to target 2,000 meters and closing," reported the helmsman, his voice tight with concentration. "The gravitational distortions are making navigation extremely difficult. It's like trying to fly through a maze that keeps changing shape." Reed monitored her instruments with growing concern. "The temporal field fluctuations are increasing exponentially. Whatever they're doing over there, it's affecting space-time in ways our sensors can barely detect. I'm reading chronoton buildups that could tear a hole in reality itself." The communication system crackled to life, carrying Prime Conductor Axiom's distinctive harmonic voice. "Human vessel Meridian, you are approaching within our operational safety zone. Maintain your current distance to avoid temporal displacement." "Effects," Torres activated the COM channel, keeping his voice calm and professional. "Assembly vessel, we request permission to observe your departure procedures from close range. Our scientists are eager to witness advanced temporal manipulation technology, even if we cannot understand its principles." There was a long pause before Axiom responded, and Torres could almost hear the alien entity discussing the request with its colleagues. "Your curiosity is noted, but proximity to our vessel during temporal transit poses significant risks to your primitive technology. We cannot guarantee your safety." "We understand the risks and accept full responsibility," Torres replied. "This may be our only opportunity to observe such advanced physics in action. We would consider it a great honor to witness your departure." Another pause, longer this time. "Very well, you may maintain position at 1,000 meters distance. Do not attempt to interfere with our operations or approach closer than the specified range. Any deviation from these instructions will be considered hostile." Chun looked at Torres with barely concealed panic. "Sir, 1,000 meters is still too far for our docking clamps to reach. The maximum range is only 400 meters, and that's under ideal conditions." Torres nodded grimly. He had expected this problem, which was why he had prepared for the next phase of his plan. "Helmsman, take us to within 900 meters and hold position. Make it look like we're having minor navigational difficulties due to the temporal distortions." The Meridian continued its approach, moving erratically as if struggling against the strange forces emanating from the alien vessel. In reality, the pilot was expertly mimicking the effects of temporal interference while gradually reducing their distance to the target. 800 meters, the helmsman reported quietly. "The distortions are actually getting stronger. This isn't entirely an act anymore." Walsh's voice came over the internal COM system. "Bridge engineering. The docking system is ready, but I need to warn you about something. The temporal field interactions are more complex than our models predicted. When we make contact, there's going to be a massive energy feedback through both ships. Define massive, Torres requested. The kind that might overload our entire power grid and possibly alert every sensor on the assembly vessel. Walsh replied unhappily. There's no way to make this subtle. When we dock, they're going to know exactly what we've done. Reed looked up from her station with alarm. David, if they detect our docking attempt, they could simply activate their temporal drive while we're still attached. The chronoton shear would tear us apart instantly. Torres weighed their options quickly. They had come too far to turn back now, and the alien vessel was already building energy for departure. In another few minutes, their opportunity would be gone forever. All hands, prepare for emergency docking procedures, he announced over the ship's communication system. This is not a drill. Secure all stations and brace for possible temporal displacement effects. The Meridian surged forward, closing the final distance to the alien structure in a desperate rush. The helmsman fought against increasing gravitational distortions as they approached the crystalline surface, looking for a suitable docking point among the geometric patterns and energy conduits. 600 meters, the helmsman called out. 500. 400. Docking clamps extending, Walsh reported from engineering. Temporal synchronization field activating. Here we go, the moment their modified clamps made contact with the alien hull, reality seemed to hiccup. Every human aboard the Meridian experienced a brief but intense sensation of existing in multiple times simultaneously. Past, present, and future collapsed into a single overwhelming moment of awareness before snapping back to normal temporal flow. Emergency alarms blared throughout both ships as energy surges cascaded through their interconnected systems. The alien vessel's harmonic singing changed pitch dramatically, becoming more urgent and complex. Through the viewports, the crew could see patterns of light racing across the crystalline surface like neural impulses through a vast brain. Docking? Clamps secured, Walsh reported, his voice strained. Temporal synchronization holding at 87%. We're locked on, but I don't know how long our systems can handle this kind of stress. Prime Conductor Axiom's voice erupted from the communication system, carrying notes of surprise and what might have been admiration. Impossible. Your species has achieved temporal synchronization using primitive quantum manipulation. How did you accomplish this with such limited technology? Torres took a deep breath before responding. Humans have a talent for finding solutions that others consider impossible. We don't always understand how something works before we try to make it work anyway. Fascinating, Axiom replied, and there was definitely amusement in its harmonic voice now. Your reckless creativity may be more valuable than we initially assessed. Very well, small beings. You have earned the right to observe temporal transit firsthand. Prepare yourselves for departure to the year 2157. The alien vessel's energy patterns shifted into a new configuration, and the space around both ships began to blur and distort. Torres gripped his command chair as the universe prepared to turn inside out around them. Time broke apart like shattered glass around the two vessels as they plunged into the temporal vortex. The Meridian groaned and shuddered under forces that human engineering had never been designed to withstand, while outside the viewports the universe transformed into something that defied every law of physics the crew thought they understood. Stars aged millions of years in seconds, swelling into red giants before collapsing into white dwarfs and then fading to nothing. Galaxies spun backward like cosmic pinwheels unwinding, while streams of pure chronoton energy flowed past them in ribbons of impossible color. Reed watched her instruments with growing amazement as they recorded phenomena that shouldn't exist. The temporal displacement rate is incredible, she reported, fighting against waves of nausea that came from her brain trying to process nonlinear time. We're moving through history at roughly 1 century per minute. The assembly's technology isn't just manipulating time, it's surfing the quantum foam that underlies space-time itself. The sensation of temporal travel was unlike anything the crew had experienced. Sometimes they felt ancient, as if they had lived for thousands of years and accumulated vast wisdom. Other times they felt newly born, experiencing wonder and confusion like children seeing the world for the first time. Past and future memories flickered through their minds, like half-remembered dreams. Walsh monitored their ship systems from engineering, watching in fascination as their equipment adapted to temporal flow in ways that seemed impossible. The quantum synchronization field is doing more than just keeping us attached, he reported. It's actually protecting our entire ship from temporal shear. Without it, our atoms would be scattered across multiple timelines by now. Through the shared hull connection, Prime Conductor Axiom's voice reached them with surprising clarity. Your species continues to surprise us, small beings. Most primitive races would have been driven insane by direct exposure to the time stream. Yet you maintain coherent consciousness and rational thought patterns. Torres found his voice despite the disorienting effects of temporal displacement. Humans are adaptable. We've survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and our own stupidity for thousands of years. A little time travel isn't going to break us. Indeed, Axiom replied, and there was definitely respect in its harmonic tones now. Observe your destination approaching. We emerge in the year 2157 above your homeworld during a pivotal moment in your species' development. The temporal vortex began to slow around them, and gradually the chaotic streams of chronoton energy resolved into normal space. But it wasn't the space they remembered. Earth hung before them, blue and beautiful as always, but surrounded by vessels that belonged to humanity's past rather than their future. My God, breathed Dr. Kim, staring at the tactical display. Those are early exploration ships from the colonial expansion period. But look at what they're meeting. Sleek alien vessels unlike anything in current human databases hung in formation around Earth, their hulls gleaming with technology that spoke of advanced civilization. The first contact scenario playing out below them was nothing like the historical records they remembered. Read sensors were going wild with new readings. I'm detecting massive probability fluctuations in the local spacetime. This isn't just the past we're observing, it's a nexus point where multiple timeline possibilities intersect. From this temporal vantage point, we can actually see alternate histories branching away from this moment. Chun monitored the communication channels between the ships below, listening to humanity's first real conversation with an advanced alien species. The Centaurian Trade Federation is offering technological exchanges in return for access to Earth's biological diversity. This is the moment that led to our rapid advancement in stellar engineering. But something was wrong with the scene unfolding. Below them, one of the human vessels was transmitting recognition codes that seemed oddly familiar. Torres studied the signal patterns with growing confusion until the terrible truth dawned on him. Those aren't historical transmissions, he said slowly. That ship is using quantum encryption protocols that won't be invented for another 50 years. Protocols based on theoretical work that Dr. Reed is doing right now. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just observing the past, they were somehow part of it. The technology that had allowed them to attach to the assembly's time machine was creating effects that rippled backward through history. Prime. Conductor Axiom's voice carried what sounded like satisfaction. Now you begin to understand the true nature of temporal mechanics. Time is not a river flowing in one direction, but an ocean where all moments exist simultaneously. Your presence here is both cause and effect of your own technological development. Walsh's engineering mind was the first to grasp the full scope of what was happening. We're witnessing a bootstrap paradox. The modifications I made to our docking system, the quantum field theories Dr. Reed is recording, even the basic principles of chronoton manipulation we're learning right now, all of this information will eventually work its way back to our past selves. Reed checked her temporal sensors again, her face pale with realization. The quantum entanglement effect isn't just keeping us synchronized with the assembly's time stream. It's creating causal loops that ensure our own timeline remains stable. We didn't just accidentally stumble into time travel, we were always meant to be here. The assembly knew this would happen, Torres said, understanding flooding through him. They didn't refuse to give us time travel technology because we weren't ready. They refused because we had to develop it ourselves through this exact sequence of events. Axiom's harmonic laughter filled their communication channels. Your species shows remarkable intuitive understanding of temporal causality. Yes, we have observed this scenario countless times across multiple probability streams. You were never denied access to time travel. You were simply required to earn it through your own ingenuity and determination. The alien vessels below began transmitting detailed technical specifications to the human ships, information that would accelerate Earth's technological development by decades. But now the crew of the Meridian could see the hidden truth behind first contact. Much of that advanced technology was actually based on principles that humans would discover centuries later and send back through time. We're not just passengers. On this journey, Kim realized, we're active participants in creating our own history. Everything we learn here will eventually become the foundation for humanity's temporal capabilities. As the Assembly's time machine prepared to return to their own era, Torres looked at his crew with newfound respect. They had attempted the impossible and succeeded, but more than that, they had proven themselves worthy of joining the ranks of temporally advanced civilizations. The bootstrap paradox was complete. Humanity had earned time travel not through gift or conquest, but by having the audacity to steal it from their own future and the wisdom to use it responsibly once they understood its true nature. Reality crystallized around them as the Assembly's time machine completed its return journey to 2387. The familiar star patterns of the Vega system reformed outside the viewports, but everything had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The crew of the Meridian sat in stunned silence, processing what they had experienced and learned during their impossible journey through time. Dr. Reed stared at her databanks, which now contained detailed recordings of temporal mechanics that represented centuries of theoretical advancement. The quantum field equations that had taken her years to develop were now supplemented by direct observational data of chronoton manipulation in action. She possessed knowledge that shouldn't exist for another 200 years, gained by witnessing her own future discoveries in the past. The paradox is beautiful in its simplicity, she said quietly, running calculations that proved their bootstrap loop was mathematically stable. We learned how to time travel by time traveling to learn how to time travel. The cause creates the effect, which creates the cause in an endless cycle that ensures its own existence. Walsh reviewed the modifications he had made to their docking system, now understanding that every design choice had been guided by subconscious knowledge of future discoveries. His innovative quantum synchronization field wasn't actually innovative at all. It was a recreation of technology he had observed during their temporal journey, implemented through what he had believed was pure inspiration. I thought I was being creative, he admitted with a rueful smile, but I was really just remembering things that hadn't happened yet. Every breakthrough felt familiar because I had already seen it working perfectly. A crystalline alien vessel began to disengage from their ship, its temporal energies slowly returning to background levels. Prime Conductor Axiom's voice reached them one final time through their shared connection, carrying warmth that hadn't been present during their first encounter. Your species has passed the test that we have administered to countless civilizations throughout the galaxy, the entity explained. Most fail because they lack either the courage to attempt the impossible or the wisdom to understand what they have accomplished. You possessed both qualities in sufficient measure. Torres felt a strange mix of pride and humility as he realized the true scope of what they had achieved. You were never going to simply give us time travel technology, were you? This was always meant to be a challenge, a way for us to prove we deserved it. Precisely, Axiom confirmed. Temporal manipulation cannot be gifted or stolen in the conventional sense. It must be earned through understanding, courage, and the acceptance of paradox. Your species demonstrated these qualities by refusing to accept our initial refusal as final. Chen monitored the separation process as the alien docking clamps released their hold on the Meridian. Why did you make it seem so difficult? Why not just explain what we needed to do? Because the knowledge must arise naturally from your own actions and decisions, Axiom replied. Had we simply told you to dock with our vessel and travel to the past, you would have learned nothing about temporal mechanics or your own capabilities. The struggle to find a solution was itself part of the solution. Dr. Kim accessed the biological data she had collected during their journey, information about how human consciousness adapted to temporal displacement. We're different now, aren't we? Changed by exposure to non-linear time. All beings who master temporal travel undergo such changes, Axiom acknowledged. You now perceive time as the multidimensional construct it actually is, rather than the linear progression your species previously experienced. This expanded awareness is necessary for safe navigation of the time stream. The separation was complete now, and the assembly's vessel began to fade from normal space as it shifted into temporal dimensions beyond human perception. But before it departed entirely, Axiom delivered one final message that would echo through humanity's future. The Eternal Assembly welcomes humanity as the newest members of the Temporal Conclave. Your first official mission will be to ensure that this conversation takes place exactly as it has occurred, maintaining the stability of the bootstrap paradox that created your temporal capabilities. With that, the crystalline time machine vanished, leaving only empty space and a small research vessel whose crew now possessed the most dangerous knowledge in the universe. They had become temporal agents by accident, guardians of causality. Through their own audacious theft of destiny, Torres looked around the bridge at his crew, seeing them with new eyes. They were no longer simple explorers or researchers. They had become something unprecedented in human history, time travelers who understood the weight of their responsibilities. So what happens now? Chun asked, voicing the question they were. All thinking, Reed consulted her temporal sensors, which were now detecting probability streams and causal threads that had been invisible before their journey. Now we go home and begin the long process of developing time travel technology. We'll publish research papers based on our observations, train other scientists in temporal mechanics, and gradually introduce the concepts that will eventually lead to this moment. A bootstrap paradox that spans centuries, Walsh mused. We become our own ancestors in the field of temporal science. More than that, Torres realized. We become the guardians of human history itself. Every major historical event, every crucial decision that shaped our civilization will eventually be responsible for ensuring they happen exactly as they're supposed to. The weight of temporal responsibility settled on their shoulders like a comfortable burden. They had sought adventure and discovery in the depths of space, never imagining they would become the secret architects of human destiny. But as they set course for Earth to begin their new roles as humanity's first-time travelers, they felt a deep satisfaction in knowing they had earned their power through courage, ingenuity, and the uniquely human refusal to accept the impossible. The aliens had said no to human time travel. Humans had responded by making it inevitable. In doing so, they had proven themselves worthy not just of temporal technology, but of the responsibility to use it wisely. The bootstrap paradox was complete, but it was also just the beginning of humanity's journey through the infinite ocean of time. As the Meridian entered hyperspace for the journey home, its crew carried with them the knowledge that would reshape civilization and the wisdom to guide that transformation responsibly. They had stolen time itself and made it their own through the simple expedient of refusing to take no for an answer.